Hello, welcome to the May 24th, 2022 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test, make sure everything is coming through, and we'll get started in just a moment. All right, so it sounds like my monitor and computer is coming through fine. My name is Gregundo. I'll be the host for the live stream today. And if you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could just ask questions. It's like basically a long Q&A session. You could ask questions in the chat field, or if you have a question or a topic that's maybe a little more advanced, you could send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. And when asking questions, if you could try to indicate if you're which version of Cubase it is, whether it's LE, AI, Elements, Artist Pro, if it's like version 10, 10.5, 11, or 12, and which operating system you're running. That information would be helpful. And we will try to get through all the questions chronologically in order. But my ability to answer questions in real time will soon be obscured, so I won't be able to do that. So if you don't see an immediate response to your question, I realize I'm going to try to spend the next 4 hours trying to catch up to all of the questions. So there may be a bit of a delay. So if we could try to refrain from asking the same question repeatedly, that would be appreciated. We will have all of the topics covered in today's live stream indexed with timestamps that will be available that you can see on the video afterwards and that will be pinned to the top. If you wanted to search for topics covered in previous live streams, since pandemic started, we've done probably 18,000 plus questions in lots of hours. But if you wanted to search, you could go to cubaseindex.com. and we want to give Jan from Stockholm special thanks for all his hard work in compiling that information. We have two people that serve as moderators, or not Steinberg employees, but we want to give a special thanks to Jazz Dude and to Agent K for all their work they do. So they will do moderation if necessary. We usually have a really well-behaved crowd. We've had some like almost invaders trying to put some weird messages, but we'll try to. But those guys do a special great job with that, so we'll give thanks to them. And also another wonderful resource of information that's available is the Cubase Nation Discord. So if you want to just find a whole compilation of different tutorials that are available, that's a wonderful site, and Jazdu does a great job of kind of spearheading that and compiling relevant information to the Steinberg community. Just a quick note, next week I will be going out to the NAMM show, so I'll be involved with that. So there won't be live streams next week. So this means that the live stream on Friday, even though it's not generally the last live stream day of the month, that will be the last live stream since I'll be doing the NAMM show next week. So we'll do on Friday's live stream, we'll do about 2 hours, and then we'll do kind of our end of month Zoom social. So, and we have a special guest, Clay Ostwald. So he's a Grammy award-winning producer, engineer, musician, all-around wonderful guy. So if you wanted to pick Clay's brain, he's attended a lot of the live. He's been on many of the live streams. So he's done, he's played at the Super Bowl. He's played on Broadway. So a wonderful musician, producer, engineer who has lots of great insights. He's done a lot of work with Gloria Estefan over the years and John Cicada, amongst many other people. So he'll be kind of our special guest. So, all right. So with that, I'm going to pop out my chat and let's go ahead and get started. Okay. So we see from a question. Hey, Greg, Cubase 12, I want to change decay times and multiple reverbs plus delays at one time based on my song tempo. Is it possible? So generally, most reverbs don't allow you to actually kind of have it synced with the particular tempo. It's generally something that's not done. It's not that it can't be done. I don't know of any reverbs that are kind of tempo syncable, but usually delays will be. So if you wanted to have your delay synchronized to the time, usually when you come here, you could actually just see this little sync button. So here I could actually put milliseconds values, but if you click on sync, you can now adjust your delay time based on different musical intervals. So if you want an eighth note delay or a dotted quarter note delay, at this point, as the song's tempo changes, the delay time will automatically change to match so that it'll always be a quarter note delay as your song's tempo speeds up and slows down. And if you wanted to manually do that for the for your reverb time on, a reverb, as opposed to just, you could come over here and just adjust kind of the reverb time, and you could do that manually. So most of the times reverbs aren't tempo synced, but delays very much are. So, all right, so let's go ahead and move on. All right, so we see Jazz Dude on the live stream. We have Uno Memento from Finland, where it's sunny and 20 degrees Celsius. We have Benny from Sweden. We have John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. All right, so we have Nick from the UK. Thanks for joining us. All right, we have Jan from Stockholm. Dallas LaRue asks... Okay, Dallas's question is, I can't find a way to create a new song from scratch with a new folder. I can create a new folder, but it always puts a new song under the name heading of older song. Thanks. Okay, so when we're starting a project, we'll come right over here. Let's do new project, and we'll say prompt for project location. So we'll come here, and I'm going to choose, let's say, I'll do a new folder, and we'll just call this 24 May 2022, and I'll get my keyboard to work for the... We'll call it idea here. All right, so as soon as we do this, we're going to we have a new folder, and at this point we have a untitled song. So we have everything that we record into this particular folder will automatically, so if I record audio, I do automation, I do processing, all that information is going to be stored into that project folder. Now, what we haven't done is to actually save the project file. So often what I will do at this point is come over here and just do a quick save as and give it a name for the file. So we'll give it a name. And now as soon as, so it's going to be called 24may.cpr. So as soon as we start working, everything's going to be saved directly into that folder that we created, and this song file will automatically be created. So maybe when you're doing this, Dallas LaRue, that you're choosing, it could be maybe that when you do the new project that you're continuing to use maybe the prompt for the project location folder, and that you're choosing the same folder over and over and over again, instead of making kind of, so ideally for file management, you'd want kind of an independent folder for each project. So if you kind of assume and select the same folder, then you might run into scenarios that you describe. All right, so we have Daniel checking in from Germany. We have Michael Pierce, who's checking in from a glorious sunny UK at last, he says. Thanks for being on the live stream. All right, we see Agent K as well. All All right, so we have Jay from Connecticut asking 2 quick queries. One, is it possible to highlight and extract MIDI notes from Very Audio, edit to MIDI track? Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look. So just open up a quick project here. Let's get this open here and we'll show you this real quick. Okay, so let's say we're here and we're going to do some Very Audio. So as soon as we have kind of our Very Audio, if you go to the functions, where you see choose functions, here you could choose extract MIDI. And we could choose to put this onto a selected MIDI track, a new MIDI track, or a project clipboard. So that's how you could just do it. So within like version 12, you will just see, I think it's also the same in 11, but you'll see under functions, extract MIDI, and then that will turn the segment detection from Very Audio into MIDI notes that you can edit. All right, and we see question number 2 from Jay. Says, I'm considering Cubase 12. Does it include headphone plugin in Nuendo? So the headphone match plugin is going to be Nuendo specific. That's not a part of Cubase 12. So it's just going to be part of Nuendo. So it's one of the differences. See John Costigan thanking Agent K and Jazz Dude for keeping the world safe for Cubasers. So that's good. All right, and we have Razel checking in from Denmark, Stefan from Sweden, Real Raven 2000 from Ireland. So great to see you back. Okay, we just see a question. Is there any way to lock incoming MIDI notes being played to scale even when recording is not enabled or a region is not created? So if you wanted to do that, you could use the input transformer. So if you don't have a region created, so let's come over here. Let's do... let's put this on the track and we'll open the panel. All right, so we say we want to transform as our process, and we're going to say type is equal to MIDI notes, and then we could choose value 1, which will be the pitch. We want to transpose to scale. So now I can say, okay, I want to put everything in E major. So now as we do this, we could just take every single note and automatically transform it into E major without an event created. So you could use just the input transformer to do that if you don't want it to use the built-in scale corrections. It's pretty easy to create kind of a blank event. And if you wanted to do this on a particular MIDI, so if you have an event, just for the benefit of people who have an event and they wanted to do this, you could choose to just do snap live input and choose your scale here. So either way will work, but if you don't want to have an event already created, just use the input transformer. All right, we have Samson Strike checking in from Austria. All right, we have D Night Alpha checking in from France. Okay, so we have a question. Just says, "Hi, project in progress. In the middle of a project, I will shorten, delete part of some record MIDI/audio. How to easily move everything in a project behind the removed parts to a free space?" Okay, so I'm not sure if it's where you want to maybe take, let's say if I hold down, let's say if I have created kind of a blank space. So let's say if I come here, all right, so let's say if I come here and let's say I have this blank space. So I'm not sure if you wanted to then take all of these parts and delete the time. So if you wanted to do that where you bring these back over, I'm just going to grab kind of the range selection tool and I'll do this kind of globally. So say I select the range, and then if you go to edit to range, you could just say cut time, and that will kind of bring everything over just like that. So let me know if that's kind of what you want it to accomplish. And it's from Peter K. Okay, so we see from Dallas LaRue, just a question. To update Cubase 12 to 12.02, do I hit the install button on the download assistant? Does a complete install? So that would, at that point, take your, so we'll go to open up the download assistant here. Just give me a second. And that would, you know, basically do a complete install and make your 12 to 12.02. So when we come to your Cubase, if you're at like 1201 or 1202, you could just simply install directly from here, and that will patch the version. So it makes it a little cleaner when it's just kind of the full application as opposed to just the single patch. All right, so we have Beat Ya Anto checking in from Kenya. Thanks for joining us. All right, we have Graham Witchers looking forward to Michael Pierce's soup of the day. All right, so we have a question from Nick. I know it's possible to configure a controller to move the volume fader of the selected track. Is it possible to do the same to the MIDI volume on any selected MIDI track? So I think if you just have, you know, so like when we set up, let's say, our MIDI remote. So I'll just jump over to my Choice Sauce controller here. So let's say if I wanted to configure this to control, you know, so really all you would have to do is have, you know, you don't even have to do that through the MIDI controller. You could, as long as your controller is transmitting MIDI CC7. So let's say if I come here and I wanted this fader to do volume on selected track. So it's a great feature that a lot of people don't know about. So I'll just take this particular fader and I want this to, we'll choose selected track. And at this point, we will just do volume. Okay, so whatever track that I have currently selected will control volume. So if I have like this audio track selected, if I did it right, let me just go to my Midi Remote, make sure I had it. Don't think I may not have assigned it. So say select a track, volume, and it will apply the mapping. Okay, so now if I'm on, let's say we have a audio track here, I select a MIDI track. So I think if I just have a controller that is transmitting CC, like a CC7, that we could, is, you know, because the MIDI track will just respond to CC7. So let me see if I could get on my controller. I'm going to reassign it here to okay, so now I'm just going to see if my controller is now spitting out CC7. All right, let's see if we can. Yeah, so as long as it's kind of actually transmitting CC7, then, you know, that information. So let's say if I just wanted to go to this particular track and I record CC7 on it. So this fader. All right, so now as soon as we play this one track, so I'll just mute this as a. So that way we, and let's look at it in the mixer here. So let's say we just had. So I thought that MIDI tracks would respond to MIDI CC7 for this particular volume, but let me just see if it's, so, but it's doing the fader, but so let me see if we could come up with, so when we take the audio track, we could obviously just control the volume on the selected, but let's say if it's on a MIDI track, even when it's transmitting CC7, doesn't seem like it's doing it as expected. But let's say if we come to Midi Remote, let's see if I could even have this selected and then maybe. Yeah, I could play around with that more, Nick, if you want to email me, but it will just kind of write the normal CC data. But I think if it's an instrument track, that selected track will automatically work. But if you're going to external MIDI, it will respond to the MIDI CC7 directly there. So, but I'll play around with it if you send me an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so we just see from Guido says that's almost a ripple edit, or if I'm wanting for that feature without selecting it. So, it's always good to, to determine what, so if I wanted to just come here and then just hit Shift X, we could just move the particular events over. So say if I wanted to take all these, I think it's Control Shift X that, but obviously, it's helpful if you define, so if we want to define the actual time that you want to cut. So let's say if I just if I just want to take those and just hit Control or Command plus Shift and the letter X, at that point, you can just simply kind of do what a lot of people would call ripple edit, just like that. So obviously you would define what parts that you want to cut, but you could just Control Command plus Shift X, and you can do it for a single or whatever events are selected. All right, Graham Witcher's sending request for Michael Pierce's soup. All right, so we see question, can Cubase set the language to bilingual mode? Example, two language menus exist at the same time. So it's kind of, it's designed to just do one language at a time. And if you're not familiar with that, you could localize it to many different languages. But I think if you had all of the menus, all of the functions in the program for sizing and space, that it's intended for one language at a time, and it could cause all sorts of different issues if every single function was doubled just to show two languages. So it's one language at a time. So it's not kind of bilingual or multilingual, I guess. Okay, so we see from Ed Rugman, it says, question, when you embed tempo data of varying BPM into a WAV file using the advanced menu set definition and make that embedded in the file, is there a way to view those multiple tempos as a list? Okay, so let's come over here. So it's not going to be as a list within the events, but we could do it if you wanted to. So let me just find my quick project here. See if I have in my recent projects. Okay, here we go. So there's a couple ways to look at it. So let's say we take an audio file with varying tempo changes. We'll go to our project menu and do our tempo detection. Let's analyze it. Okay, so at this point we see kind of, if we look at the tempo, we could see kind of it all listed here. But another area where you could see it if you go to the project browser. And now at this point you could select the tempo track. And now you could see all of the tempo changes kind of in a list like that. So it's not necessarily embedded. I don't think there's a way of seeing all of the metadata embedded in the audio file, but this is the same exact data here. So, so once again, you could just go to the project menu, to the project browser, and at this point, just choose on the left-hand side, select the tempo track, and then you could see all of the tempo changes in a list right there. Okay, so we see from Jay from Connecticut, says, Greg, I'm thinking through a project and I'm wondering if white or pink noise generation may aid as added layers. I've only heard, never generated. Could you please demo? Okay, so let's say we'll do... So what some people will do, so let's say I'll go to an audio track here. We'll come over to our tools, go to our test generator. All right, so let's go ahead and put this as pink noise, and I'll turn the volume down so it's not annoying. Okay. All right, actually, I'm just going to put this on my input channel. Okay, so I'm just going to record. Okay, so what some people will do is just take like that pink noise and often just kind of layer it in. So let's say if we wanted to, so we will play it here. Oh, let me set the right test tone. Sorry about that. Okay, so so what a lot of people will do is take this and maybe layer it in with like a kick sound. So let's say we open up Urban Ballads here. So we have our instrument sounds. All right, so let's say we have this as C1. Okay, so I will just go to a different pad and let's drag in this sound. All right. Okay, so what we'll do now is we could layer this in. So let's adjust the volume, and I will just remap this, and let's assign it to C1. Okay, so now if we played a C1, so let's just make it kind of a small, so. And then if you wanted to adjust the tuning of it, and let's say we could match kind of even the length with so even that, if we wanted to, let's say we have this sound, and if we wanted to, let's say we have our coarse tuning, and if you wanted to even put in like pitch envelopes, we could come over here. Or if, you know, to go the opposite way. So all sorts of stuff that you could, or even random pitches. So as you just kind of would layer that in, you could just, so some people kind of layer in pink noise that way with drum samples. So that's a pretty common production thing. All right, so we have a question from, looks like VTX Rudy. Why can't I color more than 8 tracks? After 8 tracks, Cubase 12 Artist will not let me change the default color. All right, so you should be able to take like a number of tracks. Let me add, and I think this works the same in Artist or Pro. So let's say I'll just make these mono tracks, and I'll do 16 that we'll select here. Okay, so when we just come right over here, if I wanted to change, you know, select the tracks, we can change colors accordingly on those tracks. If you only see kind of 8 colors, it could be that you go to the project colors setup, and from there you could see different presets. So it could be that maybe you have 8 colors. So if you go to presets, you can say I want 8 colors with 2 tints, or I want 32 colors with 2 tints, or with 4 tints. So but at that point, you should be able to kind of change the colors for any number of selected tracks. So, but if it's only doing 8 at a time, you may only have 8 project colors defined. So you may have to go to the project color setup. So, but let me know if I misunderstood the question. All right, so we see a question. Is it possible to vertically scroll using keyboard mouse combination in PC? So no, the way to do it is to, you know, you could use, so if you're vertically scrolling, all you have to do is, you know, we can't vertically zoom, but if you're just in the project window, you could just use the scroll wheel to navigate up and down. But if you wanted to zoom, like I think if we hold down, you know, we could zoom horizontally this way by holding down the control or command key, but not vertically zoom, but you could scroll horizontally just using the mouse scroll wheel. And I think if you just push and hold the mouse button down, that you could also just kind of, and this is like the scroll wheel. So if you wanted to push and hold the scroll wheel down, you could kind of navigate quickly like that within your project window as well. Okay, so we have a question from Nick. I was thinking about this the other day, wondering if I could control all volumes from one fader, depend on what track I was on. Yeah, so I thought that might work for, for the selected tracks from the single fader. Let's see if it does it on CC 121. So let's say if I'm here, just move this. But it seems like that's selected. Like I thought that would work for MIDI. It works for, obviously for audio and instruments. But if you're doing a lot of external MIDI, you might have to have another fader that's just transmits and records MIDI CC7. All right, thanks for all the great questions. And again, if you do learn a new tip or trick, make sure that you actually hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that. All right, sorry, Okay, so we see a question from Ed Rugman. It says, question, hi Greg, when using edit in place on the MIDI track, I've noticed that sometimes the arrow keys that could be used for changing the pitch of notes instead select other events on the timeline. Is this a bug? This is like with the up and down arrows. So let's say if we're here and we do an edit in place, which is just Control or Command plus Shift plus I. So, as soon as we do this, so I think that the up arrow keys are kind of within the particular, when you're on the project window, will, navigate to different tracks as just part of working on the particular edit window. But let me just take a look and see if we zoom, if there's a way to, so we do this, it goes up. Yeah, so I think the up, let me see if there might be a preference that might affect this. Okay, so there's this use up-down navigation commands for selecting tracks only. Let's try to turn that off. So it looks like if you turn that off, that you could just take the selected notes and move them up. So again, try going to this preference. And it would be under editing, use up-down navigation commands for selecting tracks only. So try disabling that, Ed, and see if that helps. Okay, so we have Best Korean Jesus on the live stream. All right, so we have a question. So thanks for joining us today. So question, I tried using the audio to MIDI on a vocal track and it was not an exact equivalent to the sung pitch. Does the resulting MIDI often need to be edited? So sometimes when you're doing, with very audio, you may have to play a little bit around with the segments. But there's also, when you do the pitch correction, Let me just drag a vocal file in real quick so we can show this. But some settings that you could do that can make a big difference is, let's say if we come over here to the very audio, and we go to the, convert, we go to the extract MIDI, often, if you do just notes and no pitch bend data, but you could include different levels of pitch bend data, and that could often translate more accurately. All right. All right, so we see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. He's having some rain in Texas. And he wants people to whack the like button. All right. All right. Give me just a second. Okay, so we have a question. Hello, Greg. Can you tell best software fade controller in Android? So I have three, I guess on my desk I have 4 different MIDI faders. So I don't use kind of an Android app for doing fade controls. I'm probably sure there's one that does like Mackie control, but maybe someone else could comment if they're running one on like an Android tablet or their phone that works well. But I don't have any experience, unfortunately. Sorry about that. All right, so we see Kerwin Young on the live stream. I was able to get coffee with Kerwin on Sunday, which is really nice. Lovely conversation about music, and it's great to hang out with you, Kerwin. I really enjoyed that. And Kerwin was we'll give special props to Kerwin because he had his piece performed at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., so that's a huge deal. So congratulations again to Kerwin for that wonderful career accomplishment. We're very proud of you. All right, so we have a question. Can you show me how you set all your colors, please? So a lot of times, like I may have more colors for a live stream, so we'll go to the project color setup. So I think in my personal studio, I may have 32 colors, something like this, just to have. And to apply the colors, and if we wanted to really be very particular about colors, we can come right over here, and like as we go through the presets, if we wanted to change the tint of the colors, you could double click and open up kind of a color wheel and be able to choose, or have the program just kind of choose for you, which kind of makes a lot of sense. I know some people can get very particular with colors. Now to apply colors to events, we could just, on single events, we could click here and change the colors. If we wanted to do it across multiple events, I could just select multiple events here, and then just change colors accordingly. And when you do this, make sure that you have the track selected and not an event. So now I could just click here and change multiple colors simultaneously like that. You could do it through the Project Logical editor. So those are some ways that I set up my colors. Let me know if there's any other ways that you had a question on. So. All right, so we have Odo Valley checking in. So, All right, and I just see that he solved his can't select problem. So yeah, if you could share what you did to solve that, just let me know what it was. I was kind of looking out for the video for it, but I didn't get it. But I'm glad you got it sorted out. And thanks for joining the live stream again. All right, so it says, question, can you trigger marker/arranger events from an external source? So if we have a number of arranger tracks or markers, so if, let's say we just come here and, all right, and let's see if we have an arranger track. So at this point, you could say, you know, I wanted to go to next marker. So if you just hit, I think like, so let's say if I have a marker selected here, let's see if I get but say if I'm on the marker track, you could hit N to go to the next marker, or B to go back. But you could also just assign particular keyboard shortcuts if you wanted to do it. So let's say if you wanted to go to your keyboard shortcuts, so let's come over here to edit menu, to key commands. And then you could see under markers that you could activate marker track, but I think if we go to, you could say to marker. And if you look under transport, I believe you could have key commands here to, you know, set markers or navigate to cycle markers, to markers here. And you could also say go to marker X, and it will kind of, like, let's say you want to go to marker 74, you could just hit to marker X and then type in 74 and it will jump there. So you could set markers there, and let's go to the arranger track, and you could trigger arranger events here from keyboard shortcuts. And once you have that done, you could also go into like the Midi Remote. And from the Midi Remote, you could assign markers, functions. So if we wanted to come over here to transport, let's say key commands, let's say transport. So you'll see to marker X, so you could assign it in the Midi Remote, or if you're in the arranger, we can come right over here and toggle the arranger events from Midi as well. So. All right, so we see that the ice cream is being dispensed by Michael Teams. Everyone always appreciates that, especially as it's starting to get hotter in a lot of places. Okay, so we have a question. Transferring a Cubase project, Artist Pro 11, to another Cubase studio for mixing. So as long as everything is kind of like, if you started the project and everything is in your, you know, all the files are in the project folder, it's literally taking that project folder and putting it on, you know, and like a cloud service, or putting on a USB drive. And then just taking that with you, uploading that project folder that will contain everything needed in that particular project. If you want it to come over and do some, you know, another way of doing it is just to come over here and do if your files are kind of spread throughout different folders and you're afraid that you're going to miss one, is just to choose the backup project. And that will ask you to define a new folder, and then it's going to copy all the information that's needed to play that project into that particular folder for you. So you could then back up that folder, either send it via WeTransfer or Dropbox, or put on a USB flash drive and take it to the studio for mixing. So, but if you everything is in the particular project folder and you start it off that way, just take that project folder and migrate that to the other computer. Okay, my chat field just jumped. Okay, so here I am back. Okay, so we see a question. How do you determine the delay value for an external instrument to make sure your hardware synths are in sync with your VSTs? Yeah, so often what happens is the VSTs are sample accurate and hardware synths just aren't. And it used to be, and if you, have conversations with composers reflecting on the old days of MIDI timing just kind of fluctuating. So what a lot of people I know do, if they need to figure it out, the timing difference in MIDI interfaces, some of them are better than others, is record just two to set up a virtual instrument track and an external MIDI track, record both the MIDI data and record the audio simultaneously. So what you may notice is, as you do this, and if let's say you just do like maybe even like a snare drum, something that's like a transient, so let's say I come here to, okay, so, all right, so let's say I have this coming from my virtual instrument, but this sound is coming from a different instrument. So once you kind of actually, so let's say it kind of looks, and you may notice that it may be like, 7 milliseconds or whatever. So let's say we look at it, and when we record the MIDI, and you make sure that the MIDI data is lined up between the virtual instrument, and the virtual instrument is going to play back sample accurately. So that's why, the apparent timing of external MIDI, since it's all competing against sample accuracy, and MIDI can't really do that. That's why we see that discrepancy. So have both of the MIDI notes and record the audio. So you could record, and at that point, just kind of look at the transients, and you could kind of set the range tool between the start of your virtual instrument file versus your external MIDI. And then if we set our length, our primary time display here, we right click it in seconds. I can see that the difference between these two will be, 5 milliseconds. So once you just adjust this, is you could select the range, and in the info line, we could see what the timing difference between your external MIDI and your sample accurate VST instrument is. And then once you have that millisecond value, you can just delay your virtual instrument. I'll just make sure it's on there. I'll just add a MIDI track. And then at this point, you could just choose to delay so that your virtual instrument, your external MIDI instrument, plays early to compensate for its timing deficiencies. But realize that with some MIDI interfaces, as you add more external MIDI tracks, that delay can change and evolve depending on how much MIDI data is being pushed out and what MIDI port it's being sent from, because most MIDI interfaces will be serial. So it's going to be, MIDI channel 1 on port 1 will be sent before MIDI channel 16 on MIDI port 8. and it's just a reality of it. So. Okay, so we see a question. Is there any way that Cubase could fix the Noom lock being off in text fields? It's only software where the cursor keys don't work. Okay, so let's say if I'm here. So I just, all right, so I just typed in those values directly from, directly from my numeric keypad. So let's say if I go to a text field here, and that's just from my numeric keypad, so it doesn't seem to be locked. So I'm not sure if Cubase is doing that, or maybe it's a keyboard setting or something, but I haven't come across that in my Mac or PC. So maybe if you could let us know what keyboard you're using as well, maybe. Yeah, so it seems like that once the text field is, we could obviously navigate to, different functions. But as soon as I go to a field and I go to enter in text, and that's all from the numeric keypad, that it works as expected. So let me know if I'm doing something differently or if I'm misunderstanding. All right, so we have Scott checking in from Zambia. All right, so we see Scott is asking, does the normalized process affect whether I can compress anymore? So they're kind of independent. So let's say if I wanted to normalize the audio file here. So let's say I want to take this file and let's normalize it. So I'll go to processes and we'll normalize it, say, to 0 dB. So we'll come right over here. So we'll do our loudness normal, or we'll do our peak, and we'll say 0 dB. All right, so now this is at 0 dB. But if I wanted to apply, let's say, a compressor, so you may not be able to add as much gain after you've done your normalization. But let's say if I wanted to go to a compressor now, and you see that as I dial in the compressor values, that the waveform will change. So you could still compress after normalizing, but if you're kind of using the compressor to get more gain, you may not get as much benefit from it. But if you're doing more dynamic control, then you could definitely still use, the compressor afterwards that are independent processes. All right, so we have Madge from UK again. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're doing well. All right, we see Odivali got some ice cream. Probably from Michael Teams. We have such a nice community here. Love all the people. All right, so Scott, Zambia is looking for anyone who wants to collaborate and critique each other's work. So if anyone wants to do that, you could send a quick message to Scott. All right, so we see a question from Scott. It says, I can't seem to bring up the Chord Assistant in Vari Audio. It just brings two options, and I can't expand the two dots. Okay, so let's come over here. Let me just add chord track. Okay, so I'll just add some chords. Okay, so within the Very Audio Editor, you don't see the chord track necessarily, but once you have, let's say, the chord track here, that you could look at the Scale Assistant. So as soon as we can say, okay, I'm in the key of D, and now we could colorize based on the scale and the chords. So now, or if I want to only lock notes, we do snap the pitch editing. So now as I move notes, it's only going to go to notes that will be within the defined scale. So this way I can't make it necessarily go out of key. It'll just automatically go there. So with the Chord Assistant, you don't necessarily see it in Very Audio. So you have the Scale Assistant, and again, just to access that is just make sure that you click here. So I'm not sure if it's different in Artist. I think it would be the same, since Cubase Artist has the full Very Audio. All right, we see Best Green Jesus is feeling unprepared today for the live stream because he was for his questions. So I'm sure you could learn something from someone else's questions, and it's not like you have to study for the live stream. We just want people to learn. Okay. All right, so we have a question. Is it okay to change an old song that has been recorded in 24-bit to 32-bit float? Does it automatically change everything that has been recorded? So realize that when you play back any audio file in Cubase that's 20, you may not get a huge benefit from it. Because when you're playing back audio in Cubase, if you have a 24-bit recording, and now you're playing back the file, as soon as it'll be 24-bit. Now, as soon as it's modified by the audio engine, this is like, raising it, 1/100th of a dB. As soon as we change the audio in any way, any process, at that point, as soon as it's not playing just a raw file and it's being processed, it's now being processed in 32-bit floating point, or you could even select 64-bit floating point. So I don't think you'll have a benefit converting your 24-bit 24-bit audio wave files to 32-bit float. But realize that as soon as you're playing and mixing and using virtual instruments, that at that point, as soon as it's modified, adding any plugin, any gain, any EQ, that it's immediately in 32-bit floating point resolution or 64-bit for all the processing. All right, reading through questions. We see lots of ice cream going out. All right, so we just see question from Madge. How can I use my iPad as a third screen using Cubase? So it's not a Cubase function. It's really going to be just, I think on Mac, you could use your iPad as like a monitor extension. That you could do that as long as it's being seen as an available monitor extension at the operating system level, because Cubase doesn't necessarily have dedicated video drivers. It just kind of is utilizing the operating system level video display. So as soon as you have that available in your video display, you could then drag any window to any of your available display monitors. So it's probably just, there's probably utility. There's probably one on Mac Mac and Windows as well. But as soon as it's available, where you could open up anything, it's connected as like a third screen in your computer. It's an available screen for Cubase to use. All right, we see Graham Witcher is going to jump back. He has to do some domestic chores. So it's always fun. Has to be done, though. All right. All right, so we see a question from Scott Zambia. I have some unusual metallic artifacts in one of the vocal takes I received. It almost sounds like phasing. Is there a way to salvage that vocal data and make it sound a bit natural? So sometimes, it's hard to say. So it's probably, if it's playing, in time against other tracks, then it might be kind of a phasing issue. Generally stuff, if you're playing it by itself and it sounds metallic, at that point, it probably wouldn't, if it was isolated, it probably wouldn't be a phasing issue unless it's maybe a stereo file and the two microphones were out of phase when it was recorded. But if you want to share like a sound example of that, I'd be happy to take a listen to it. It's kind of hard to figure out without hearing it to see kind of what it is. If it is, sometimes it might be just sibilance where someone's like, those like S's and Z's. It's like that kind of distortion could be causing kind of a metallic sound, and that could be something that you could take out maybe with Spectral Layers. But if you have a file that you could share so we could hear it, it could probably give you a more accurate idea. All right, so we see Jazz Dude saying, by the way, the only hip-hop rap I ever listened to is Public Enemy, Takes a Million. That shows my age. So I'm sure Carwin has done a lot of work with Public Enemy, so, and very involved with them. So. All right, so we see Odavali solved his system and not being able to select by rebooting, so it's always a good thing. All right, so we have Raheem, just checking in late, so no worries about being late. All right, just try to find my spot. Okay, so we have a question from Michael Drake. I have a Behringer X-Touch and X-Touch compact MIDI controllers. Can you please show me how to add Cubase 12 Pro to work consecutively? One control first set of 8 faders, the second control, and the next set of. So really what you do in that case is, and this is kind of part of the Mackie control protocol. So you'd go to your studio setup and you need to click in the plus sign here. So we're going to add 2 Mackie controls. Okay, so here you can see you have multiple Mackie controls, and then you would set these for the correct MIDI ports. And then at that point, you could have, a number of different Mackie controls. And one would be kind of, channels 1 through 8. The second one would be channels 9 through 16. And then as you bank, it would automatically kind of sequentially change the assignments like that. So just simply add 2 Mackie controls. And this is again in the studio menu. to studio setup, click on the plus sign, and then you could have your 16 channels of control surface with the two devices. All right, so we see for Michael Teams, I was trying the hit points on the track and touched something, and the train wreck occurred. No idea where everything went to. Please go the hit points again for this dinosaur. So, all right. I don't think you're a dinosaur, Michael. All right. So let's say if we wanted to. Okay, so realize that as Cubase records, it's going to generate hit points. And then we could take these particular hit points. So we double click here. Just select. And I'll get out of. So I'll go to my hit points tab. Okay, so as we look at our file, we could see that we will just have hit points created here. Now, hit points, we could think of these as kind of markers, all right? And if we wanted to go to our hit points, one of the things that you could do now is, you may have to adjust a threshold. So let's say, okay, like this may be like drum tracks bleeding through like our kick. This may be hi-hat or snare. We could also adjust kind of the sensitivity. So once we kind of have our hit points configured, what I like to do is just to click on, and you'll see create, and then you'll see warp markers. So now I'm going to go to the project window, and I find and we want to switch over to free warp. I'm going to make this a little bigger, and we may have to zoom in. Because otherwise, you'll see that these warp markers, once we're in our free warp tool, once that's activated, and some people go, oh, I don't see it. And because at a certain point, if, you have to be zoomed in, otherwise it's just going to all be vertical yellow lines. So now that we have these particular events and I have the warp markers defined, I can now move kind of the rhythmic value of these to automatically line up. And we can see that if we have snap turned on, we could have it kind of automatically snap to the grid here. So if you're like a little late or a little early, you could just warp the particular events like so. Okay, so we see, hi Greg, is there a way we can apply swing to multiple tracks, please? All right, so let's come over here. Or I'll just jump back to our project. Okay, so let's say I'll just add some MIDI tracks. So just add some instrument tracks here. Okay, I'll just make an event. And let's say I want my quantized value here to be 16th notes. I'm just going to grab my paintbrush. get my modifier key. I'll just do it in the drum editor here quickly. Okay, and I'll go ahead and just duplicate this particular track. Okay, so let's say we'll have all these. So really all you have to do is select these. And if you wanted to come right over here, let's open up kind of our quantize panel. So I'll just come over here and say, okay, let's do our quantize panel. And now we will come here. Let's just add our swing amount. And we can see that the audio and MIDI will just be applied. And if I wanted to look at this event versus that event versus that versus that. So that's how, whatever you have selected, MIDI and audio, you could quantize the swing kind of simultaneously. Just the quantize will kind of take effect on whatever is selected. All right, you see Michael Teams has passed on 1 gallon of coconut cream pie ice cream. That sounds great. Thank you, Michael. It's very, very generous. See, Michael Pierce had to arrange a trip to the Natural History Museum. So my son went to the Smithsonian Natural History just about a month ago on a school field trip. Always a great museum. All right, and we see Brian Sawyer from Beulahville, North Carolina. Thanks for joining. Okay, all right, so we see, all right, and we have Spike Williams joining from Wales in UK. All right, so let's see, we have a question. Greg, let's say you edit a track name and want to jump to position 1. Okay, so I edit my track name as I hit, and now I go to all right, so just reading through this. This is from Real Raven. Greg, let's say you edit a track name and want to jump to position 1. If you're working on a project where it has, then Greg, you're actually using the cursor keys in the text field. Okay, so it says, Greg, let's say you're edit a track, let's say, okay, my time position here. Okay, I have this. I edit the name. All right, it says This is with a numeric lock. So it says, Greg, let's say you edit a track name and want to jump to position 1. It says, Greg, you're actually using cursor keys in the text fields. It says, Greg, note, should not type numbers with num lock off. You should be able to use the cursor keys. It says, note, should not type numbers with the num lock turned off. All right, so let me see if I have low light here. Okay, so I'll do, I think this is my num lock key on. All right. Okay, so just reading this through. So it says, Greg, let's say you edit a track name and then want to jump to position 1. So, okay. Just let me make sure I have my... Oh, sorry. Okay, so so Greg, let's say you edit a track name, want to jump to position 1. It says, then Greg, are you actually using the cursor keys in the text fields? And it says, Greg, note, should not type numbers with num lock off. You should be able to use the cursor keys. Then it's, no, it should not type numbers with num lock turned off. You should be able to use the cursor keys and not insert random numbers. 7 equals home, 4 equals cursor left. So I think, so it's a, so make sure I have my num lock turned on. Okay. So let's see if this did it. I may have to read up on my keyboard just to make sure. Not sure if it's a function key on my computer keyboard or not. So, I mean, it's maybe if you want to send me an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de, I could do some more research on it, Real Raven. But it's, yeah, I haven't had a lot of people complain about that. So, okay, so. Okay, so you see, if you're working on a project where it has to start its SMPTE address of 1 hour, what offset should you set in project setup? Okay, so let's say, so one of the things you could do is, let's say, we have to, we look at our time here. So let's add a ruler track. All right, and let's look at SMPTE timecode. So I think the easy way to do this, if you need this to be 1 hour, is to go to the project menu and set timecode at cursor. And then just and now measure 1 is starting at 1 hour. So just try to project menu to set timecode at cursor. So I did, you may see it coming out soon. One of the Q&A videos I did just kind of went through like, 10 different offset scenarios. So look for that coming. But, if you need measure 1 just to start, if you need that to be measure 1 and you need it to start at 1 hour, just simply set it in project menu to set timecode at cursor. All right. So we have a question from Vicente Vince Music. Hi, Greg. Why sometimes tracks in a project don't apply colors? Even I try only in the events, even events don't select it. Thanks. So realize that, the color selection. So let's say if I come here and I have my color select, my color tool, and let's say I have this as my selection. So as soon as I grab my color tool here, that we could click on it and it will, but beware, like if you're trying to, if you have like a track and an event selected and you want to change the track, realize that since the event is selected, that's going to take priority over the track. So sometimes what you could do is just kind of click in a blank spot and then make sure that nothing is selected, or there is a select none command, and then you could choose to colorize the track itself. And often, sometimes you have the track colors. If it's before you do that, carry over to the event colors there. All right, so I just see Real Raven just going back with the Noom lock on. It says, Noom, with Noom lock pad 4, cursor left, Noom lock, Noom pad 6 equals cursor right. That's standard if Noom lock is off. So I'll play around with that, but I haven't really come across that as a standard. But I could do some more research on it if you want. Okay, so we have a question from VQT Piano. Could you show the steps of routing tracks to group, edit channel strips, and then VCA, please? Okay. So let's say if I have a number of tracks, let's say like drums here. All right, and I'll just revert the project quickly. Okay, so let's say if I have a number of tracks and I want to send these to a group, I could select all the tracks, right click, and then we could add a group channel to the selected channels like that. And we could also take the selected channels and add track and add a VCA fader to the selected channels. So now all the drums are going into the VCA and to the group. Okay, and let's say for channel strips, it's really all you have to do. You know, Cubase has a great channel strip, so if you just come here directly to the channel, just click on the edit button, and then you could activate whether you wanted to have noise gate, compressors, EQ, if you want a de-esser or an envelope shaper, let's say tape saturation, a maximizer. These can all be changed in order. So you could just kind of come, and if you wanted the channel strip to come before inserts, you could just kind of click right there, and you could switch to signal flow order between those two, like so. So let me know if that helps. All right, we see P Zone 36 is joined, so thanks for joining. Okay, my chat field just jumped on me, so let me just find my spot. All right, so we see that technology and Deso just thinks I'm a kind person, so that's good. I'm just glad to share some knowledge. All right, so we see, is it possible to add groups to selected tracks with folders outside setting option with macros? Thanks. So the only way to do it, if you wanted to do it all at once, it would be just through the macro. But, you could, it's just a two-step process otherwise. So if I wanted to come here and select these, if I have these tracks selected, I could right-click, and move selected tracks to new folder, and then add group channel to the tracks. So it's 2 mouse clicks to do it otherwise, or you could use the macro, which just kind of puts those together for you. And you could take the macro and create a custom keyboard shortcut for that. All right, so we see question. So hi, Greg. Can I customize schemes, interface colors, and mix console and everything as I want? Same as Cubase older version. So, some of this stuff doesn't necessarily apply, but you could do a lot of different functions. So if you go to your Cubase to preferences, and you'll see kind of color schemes under user interface. And then you could change like different backgrounds, different fader colors if you want. So if you wanted to have different mixed console fader colors, track color types, different color schemes. So if you wanted the project area background to be lighter, like older versions of Cubase, you could do that, so you could do a lot of tweaking directly there. So if you play around with that, you could probably mimic kind of an older visual look to more legacy versions of Cubase. All right, we see Jeff Zabelski checking in from Chico, California. Thanks for joining us. All right, we see Randy Lee from Texas, just says step off, get some lunch. All right, you see Michael Teams just says that helps me figure out what I did with the warp markers. All right, Jeff Zabelski he needs some ice cream because he did his 2-mile walk. So that's good. All right, so we see from Spike Williams, I love the Cubase 5 way of setting up markers, Alt plus marker number, and recalling markers using numeric pad. Is there an easy way of doing this using the Cubase 12 marker track? Sorry if this is a dumb question. No dumb questions at all. All right, so let's... All right, so let me just see if I can get the key commands. I'll make sure. Okay, so I think it's just... Okay, so let's say, so it looks like as you put markers in, that it's just going to take it sequentially. So let's say if I had dropped markers in, that now if you go to marker 3, if I hit 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So they just kind of go in order. So 1 will be like your left locator. So so let's say if we come here, 2 will be the right locator. Then if I just hit 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you could just kind of navigate, but you don't necessarily define the marker as you do it. You just define that there's a marker there, and then you can navigate. And again, if you just once you have like the marker track selected, you could just hit N or B to go to next, or go to next marker, or back to previous marker. So next or back. So it's a little different, but I think you can kind of get the same result. And how did you just drop a marker and then you just recall it using the same numeric keypad functions. All right, so we have Enzo Mag from South Africa in the house. So thanks for joining. Okay, so we see from Jeff Sabelski, and he just says, I would like to use the option of having a second marker track on larger projects. It'd be like a staging area as I use a second video track. So yeah, in Cubase, you could have up to 10 different marker tracks. Nuendo, I think you could have 32 marker tracks. So if I just wanted to come here and put marker tracks, and then as we navigate, we could just choose which marker track that we're looking at. So you could just easily just kind of jump back and forth there. So you could place the marker tracks freely wherever you want. So if you want one marker track under the video, and we see this a lot in post-production, like if you're doing ADR work where you might have to have a separate marker track for each character, for dialogue replacement, stuff like that, or for scenes or different sound design cues. All right, so we see using warps on multiple tracks with a question mark. So yeah, this is one of the things that was introduced in Cubase 12. So if you wanted to, come over and just say, I'll revert this. So if you have like, multiple mic'd guitars, or if you wanted to very easily. Just kind of put warp markers on your, so 12 added the capability of doing this on our timeline. So what you want to do is place them into a folder, and you want to activate group editing. And probably this time you want to just activate phase coherent warping. And now as I would drop a warp marker in, it's going to drop it on all of the tracks for us. And now we could just kind of do free warping, kind of just that easily. So you could do it across multiple tracks. So it was one of the great new features that people wanted for a long time. And it was realized in version 12 just a couple months ago. All right, so you see Real Raven just saying as soon as you're in a text field, numlock will convert everything into numbers, but numlock off should not do this. Okay. I'll do some more research. I wasn't aware of that as a default functionality, what you described. I don't doubt it, but I've never come across that in other programs. So. See, Jeff Sabelsky is just saying, field trip to the Smithsonian in D.C., 9 years old from Michigan. First stop, Washington Monument. I ran all the way up and all the way back down, too impatient for the elevator. Still have the pics. That's great, yeah. Yeah, so we're lucky. I feel lucky that, live so close to D.C. that we can just kind of pop in and see monuments and wonderful museums. Okay, reading through more comments. We see that Madge has to drop off. So thanks for joining us today. There you see Jeff Sabelsky was number 91 on the like. Yeah, so I see Real Raven's going to send a message, and he's just indicating that, when you turn numlock on, that turns into a navigation area. So I was never aware of that. So, yeah, I've been using computers for a while, but I can bring it to their attention. All right, so we see how does one set up multiple sub mixes in control room, please? I guess if this is maybe for maybe like for Q mixes, but really all you have to do is make sure that in your setup, that when you go to your setup here, we'll go to our audio connections and go to the control room, and you want to basically set it up for, Vox, different Q mixes. And we have up to 4 Q mixes. And I'll just open up a different project with this kind of set up. just find a project. All right, so what you have to do is once you have kind of like the 4 Q mixes, I think I got your email, Real Raven, so thanks for sending that over. Okay, so we go to, let's say, our mix console. So at this point, we could make sure that our Q sends is activated in the rack, and we could select all of our different tracks. So I'll select all my tracks here. And then in the control room, so I've set up different outputs, and this would be maybe different headphone outputs feeding headphone amplifiers or headphone outs on our system. So these would probably be discrete outputs. So we'll have those set up, and I'm going to select all the tracks so we can do this quickly. I'm going to right click, and let's use the, we're going to activate the Q sends. And these will show up under the Q's rack. And let's use the current mix levels. And that's why we want to make sure that that is actually activated in the racks. So at this point, we have kind of the same mix for all of the different components here. But now if I wanted to send the drummer more of themselves into their drum mix, I could activate Q-Link, and I'll just send more drums to the drummer's mix. I'll send more bass to the bass player's headphone mix. Let's find our guitar parts, and we will send more guitar parts. To our guitar mix. So now as we played, if I wanted to switch between like my mix and maybe the guitar mix, that's the bass player's mix. Now let's say our drummer's mix, so that they could each have different independent mixes. So let's say the drummer wants to hear more bass. I can now just go to my bass track and send more of the bass into the drum headphone mix. And if I wanted to listen to my mix, so this way different musicians could have their own Q mix. So let me know if that's what you mean with that. So maybe that's what you mean by the multiple submixes. All right, so we have Fred Robinson from Norwich. Thanks for joining. He was doing kid taxiing duties. Great to see you on the live stream. Been a little while. Okay, so we see what is the best way to delete, remove old Groove Agent kits? Some of mine are old and outdated, trying to keep it clean. So if it's going to be factory content, sometimes those will all be kind of tied together for kind of licensing protection, so that people don't necessarily just, take the samples that have been kind of created for a long time. But if it's going to be just like a factory kit, you could just, select it in the media bay, or if it's a user-defined kit that you've created, at that point you can go into media bay and go to that folder and just choose to delete the particular preset. All right, so we see how do you download this? So you can get it from the Steinberg website. You go to steinberg.net. And if you purchase it, then you get a license. It'll give you a download access code that you could put into the Steinberg download assistant. And then you could download it, install, and run, and create wonderful music. All right, so we see Greg, I've been loving to come here, clarify stuff with your mastery. One more. So the question is, if I route a mono track to one channel of a stereo output so I can reamp, will pan law mess with the gain? So, let's take a look. So when you're doing that, if you're just doing the one output, I think you should be fine. But you could always just set the pan law, because the pan law doesn't necessarily make, technically it doesn't make the tracks on, like, when you pan them to the hard left or to the hard right, it doesn't make them louder. It just really attenuates the center. So I think you should be fine with that. But you could try adjusting the pan law settings and see if you notice any difference. It may not make a difference for reamping scenarios. All right, we see from Dr. Faze. Sorry, just jumped on me, my time fine. What would be the steps to try to get rid of my audio drop off during mix? So, one thing to do, the first thing is, you could just come over here and see if you go to your audio interface and increase the buffer size. That would be the first thing I would do, is just to make sure that the buffer size is raised up. At that point, if it's, you're still having dropouts, see if you could, if you have a track with a lot of plugins, try to right click on it and disable selected tracks and see if you could isolate it to maybe one track that's causing dropouts versus, so sometimes you could disable and then everything plays fine. And then you can say, okay, maybe I could render in place or freeze that particular track to, free up CPU or audio processing resources from that track. So it could be run, but generally if you haven't raised a buffer, that would be the first thing to do. Okay, thanks again for all the wonderful questions. All right, so we have Mike Rivera checking in from San Antonio, Texas. Thanks for joining again. All right, so we see question, how to set a favorite project coloring scheme as common coloring scheme. So I think if we just come over and let's say if we go to your project color setup, so we'll go to our project menu to project colors setup, that when we come over here to options, once you have everything set up, that you could save color set as default. So say, okay, I really love this. And at that point, just click on Save Color Set as Default under the Options menu. Let me know if that makes sense for what you want to do. See, Spike Williams says, Greg, N&B tip was most helpful for markers. And it's also great for doing, navigating hit points and events. So all sorts of great stuff you could do to navigate forward and backward. Okay, so we have a question, latency. If I have to low samples less than 512, the project won't play properly. And if I have more delay between playing live MIDI keyboard is too much, any tips? So that's exactly why you have this function in the transport called Constrain Delay Compensation. So if we come over here and we activate this, any track that has plugins that are causing a lot of latency, those plugins will be bypassed so that you could play without having the added burden of the latency of those particular tracks. So instead of you having to go through and manually delete or disable or turn off particular plugins one by one, this will say, okay, every plugin that causes latency, just turn it off, bypass it for now, and then once you play your part, just come right over there and deactivate the constrained delay compensation once the part is in, and then you should be all set. All right, so we see the sound president following from Kenya. See, Michael Teams just says he loves the Smithsonian. So, yeah, I was always spoiled growing up here, and I go to other cities and pay $20 to go to a museum, and it's like, this is terrible. And all the Smithsonians are free. It's great that they're open again, as long as you wear a mask. Yeah, I see Fred just saying it's funny hearing Noomlock instead of Numlock. Like we say in the UK, so we say it's like numeric lock as opposed to number lock, I guess. So maybe it's an American thing. Like as Michael Pierce pointed out, that we always call it AKG 414s in America, but in England it's a 414. So it's probably a Sennheiser 421 as opposed to a Sennheiser 421, what we call it in the US. All right, so we have a question. How do you add multiple controller lane custom preset key editor lanes in different workspaces? Okay, so let's take a look at it. Let me just jump back to different project. All right, so let me just say. All right, so let's say I have this as my controller lane. So let's see if we save this as. Because we might be able to just actually see if we could save it as a key command. So you could set up under Midi, there's controller lane setups. So I think that you could actually just save these as presets if you wanted to. So if you didn't want to, save it as part of a workspace, which probably wouldn't carry that over. But it looks like you could just have the, let's see how many you could have. 16 different controller lane setups configured for you. So let me know if that works. All right, so we have a question from David Henson. How to run Cubase and Speculators both at the same time in standalone mode? So I think that once you have, let's say we have Cubase open here, that we could See, I'll just open up a later version of Spectral Layers. So here I could just, have it opened as well. But I think kind of the true greatness of it is being able to run them kind of through ARA. So let's say if I want to take this event here, we could go directly to our extensions. So we'll see an extension here on the info line, and then we'll choose Spectral Layers. And now I could launch this particular event into Spectral Layers. So now Spectral Layers is open. I double click on the event and the sample editor turns into Spectral Layers. And I can make it permanent, any of the changes that I've done here, or I could just remove the extension directly there and go right back to the sample editor. So you can run it standalone, but I think, obviously not having them in sync with each other probably is a better workflow. Okay, so I see is Isotope RX9 now support inside Cubase with the AMA? So I'm not sure if it does ARA or if AMA is a different configuration. As long as it does ARA, you could use it. So, but I think they might have some proprietary thing. I haven't used it in a long time. Okay, so all right, just reading through comments. Okay, so I think this with Dr. Phase maybe just indicates done that, not working, and that's maybe with raising the buffer. So it's probably, if you've gone through and, tried disabling, all the tracks and turn on tracks one at a time and see if you see like a CPU jump. It's probably just going to be one plugin or one track that has, if you have one track that has like 14 plugins on it, that could be, creating a lot of audio performances because it's not scaling the processing across multiple cores. All right, so we see a question. Now that I've upgraded from Cubase 11 to 12, can I remove the dongle? It's been 2 months of me not removing it. So you can, if you have like other third party, like other components that are utilizing the e-licenser, those may still be required to use the e-licenser. So, but, give it a shot. And, like if you have a lot of different Groove Agent kits and Hallian libraries, those may be utilizing the actual, maybe utilizing the e-licenser still while we're still transitioning to the new Steinberg licensing. All right, so just see, can I open .slp files in Cubase with Spectral Layers extension? So let's say if we come over here. So thinks like once it's running the file. But if you could let us know if the SLP is like the Spectral Layers project file, but I think for the most part, the hosting when running it as an extension is going to just be, is going to be just in the program, and then you do all the processing in Spectral Layers from there. All right, so we see Best Green Jesus thinks USA should follow a suite and adopt California Standard Time. Like Japan has one time zone, so probably if people on the East Coast said East Coast, then California people wouldn't like it. All right. Okay, so we see Gerald Ely saying, "Oh man, I'm late to class. Sorry, Mr. Undo. I missed the bus. Did you talk about buses already?" So we had a little discussion of buses, and again, as long as you're here, Gerald, we're happy to have you here. Okay, so we see, could you explain how the brackets in the logical editor work? All right, so let's take a look. Okay, so I'm not sure if it's this. So let's say, all right, let me just come here. Okay, so let's take a look at the, so let's say type is equal to note. All right, so I think if it's these brackets, let's see if we can figure this out. I haven't worked with this in a long time. Okay, so let's say, all right, so we could select. All right, so let's see if we, so it might be with the Boolean conditions. So let's see. So we do that, then we could choose but if we do all, let's see what happens if we. So we have that, then. So I could do some more research on this, but it might be to set up kind of different conditions. Let's say I have these notes, and let's just look at our velocity. Like we might be able to group attributes, common attributes together. So let's see if we could. So I think it might be, allowing you to, I'll do some more research on it. But I think it might be like if you have like this note with one bracket, maybe that it does like, this pitch and this velocity that it might be able to kind of keep like different criteria together, but I'm not sure. But I could do some more research and hopefully have an answer on Friday. Sorry about that. Okay, just reading through comments. So I just see what specific streaming software are you using? So I'm just going through OBS, and then I take the stream key for the YouTube channel just through there. So just OBS. And I just see a question, how are you routing a submix from Cubase to OBS? So what I do is I have basically two different audio interfaces. One is a Yamaha USB mixer where my microphone is connected. I take the audio out of Cubase through a UR24C into the Yamaha mixer. I combine my microphone into the Yamaha mixer, so Cubase sees my UR24C, and the stream sees the Yamaha mixer. So that's how it works. Kind of do two different devices. That way I can change sample rates, and it's much easier, and I don't have to worry about it because I have a lot of things to navigate and switch between to do a live stream of having the computer open as well as, the computer I'm reading all the questions and the discussion from. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to visualize all the plugins that we have at a glance, since we have third-party plugins and we forget that they are there? Thank you very much. So probably if you just go to the studio menu to the Vst Plugin Manager. So here you could see all of your effects plugins that are installed, all of your instruments that are installed. And if you have any plugins that are on the block list, you could just come right over here and see all of your third-party and factory plugins, like native Cubase plugins. You could see them all show up right there. All right, so we have a question. Can you show your control room configuration? All right, so let's come over here, and so let's go to my audio connections. So often, like at my personal studio, what I have, something similar. So I have two headphone outs. Not that I've had anyone really tracking, coming over to track at my studio, but I have two headphone outs wired with different, going into headphone amplifiers for distribution if needed. I could have a phone call. And then I have monitors set up. So in my studio, I have like a stereo pair of monitors, and I have like an NHT 5.1 set up. So I have like my 5.1 monitors. I have my large stereo speakers as my primary. I have a 5.1 setup, and I use a secondary stereo setup, which is my left and right of my 5.1. And if I want to do a center channel, I have a mono configuration for another monitor. So that's just my center channel. So as I work with that, then but once I have that kind of set up, I could switch between different headphone mixes, and I could switch between different speakers. I could dim, I could set different reference levels, all of these different components that you could just access directly right here from the control room. All right, so just seeing comments, says the buses, different monitor buttons. I can't find those in Cubase 11 Pro. So, if you have different monitor buttons here, like if you're talking about like these monitor buttons, or if let me see if this is just, maybe it's a continuation. Okay, so so it's a continuation for the control room. So as soon as you set up the control room, they don't show up until you kind of right click, and then you add Q mixes or you add monitors. Then once they're shown in the control room, then they're all available here for you to access in the control room. So we see, can Cubase be triggered by external timecode source? LTC input to Cubase, certainly. So if you just come over here, go to your transport, and go to project synchronization setup. So you could tell it to look for MIDI timecode and where it's coming in. So the MIDI timecode input port, just set that there. And if you're synchronizing digital audio, make sure that your synchronization box also spits out word clock to resolve the word clock. And then you would need to have an audio interface that would have, as soon as you go to your clock source settings, you would just set that to wherever you have the digital word clock synchronization from the sync box directly in there. Otherwise, the audio may drift from tape because the audio is a much finer resolution. But again, just go to your transport, project synchronization setup. You can activate external sync, tell it to go to MIDI timecode, and go straight there. Okay, just reading through comments. Okay, just still reading. All right, so we see a question. Hi, how to color individual MIDI notes within one event? Okay, so let's say I want it to come here, and I have different MIDI notes. So, you know, generally we see that the color scheme will default to velocity, but you could also choose in the color scheme here just to colorize by pitch. And then each note could have its own independent color. So you could just choose pitch by MIDI channel, by grid match, by voice if you have multiple voices, or by scale. So, but if you want each one to be colorized based on pitch, just come here and select pitch, and then each pitch will have its own independent color. Okay, so we have a question. Is it possible to have more than one MIDI remote set up in Cubase for one device? So what I've seen some people do, if you wanted to kind of break it up, is, you know, I think, so let's see, I have my Choy Sauce controller here. So let me see if we could set up another one. So let's say, okay. Let's see if we could. Looks like if it's going to have one MIDI port for one device. So if your device could transmit over two different MIDI ports, then I think you're okay, which some controllers can do. But if it's transmitting on the same MIDI port as other devices, I think that it's kind of spoken for, per se. Okay. So just my chat field jumped to me, so. Thanks for the moderation. All right, so you see from Technology and Desos just saying, can Cubase edit audio and video at the same time? Can you demo, please? All right, so let's do, so yeah, you could do some, it's not really intended to be a video editor, but if you needed to cut the video, you could do that and have it re-rendered. So let's come here, I'll import a video file. And this will have the audio and MIDI's, the video and audio here. So let's say if I just wanted to take out just a particular range. I can come here and I'll hit Control or Command plus Shift X, and we can see we just edited the video and audio at the same time. So it's not going to do transitions or dissolves or color correction. Okay, just reading through comments. All right, so we see, will the muted audio when playing back timeline and adding new instruments ever be fixed? The AirDAWs just does it just fine, but Cubase still struggles. So I think what happens is the other DAWs basically play back all the MIDI tracks. So like when you add a virtual instrument, you may notice that there's a little audible, there's a bit of an audible hiccup. And what that is as you're adding instruments and adding different plugins, sometimes that's doing the delay compensation. So that's resetting the delay compensation, where a lot of programs will just play until you stop and then reset the calculation for plugin delay compensation. So Cubase just does the plugin delay compensation immediately, which could be critical if you're doing, MIDI sequencing and you don't want all of your tracks to start being out of phase after adding an instrument until you hit stop. All right, we see Matt Elliston from London checking in. Thanks for joining us. So just see a comment. Yeah, MIDI timecode, but maybe the plugins must be aligned to that config, I guess. So yeah, there's no problems, with plugins, while syncing to MIDI timecode. So see Jeff Sabelski, after all the food discussion, needs to go to Trader Joe's. Love going to Trader Joe's. All right. Okay, so we see, hi Greg, Stephen Manchester. I have an old 4-track tape song placed in Cubase. There's a chord I can't play. Is Cubase intuitive enough to show me what your chord is via the chord track? So yeah, with Cubase 12, we added the capability of doing that. So I just find something that doesn't, let me just open up a project here real quick. Okay, I'll just show this one here. So all you have to do is just drag the audio file itself that has chord events on audio, drag that to a chord track. Let's get this project open here. It's kind of a big one. Okay, so let's say I want to take this guitar part here and drag it to the chord track. And then it will just automatically come up and give you the chord track and generate it just like that. So just drag the audio event to a chord track, and it's in version 12, one of the new features. All right, so we see off skill, it says checking in, saying he's Russian. So thanks for joining us. All right, all right, so just reading through comments and all right, so lots of food discussion today. Okay, so it just says when recording using MIDI keys, adding instruments and insert plugins, what is the easy way to convert to waves? Saves my processing audio and continue workflows. It's just really just, taking a particular event here. And, the easiest way I found to do it is just to, you could just come over here and just choose to render in place. And so if I just want to take this, we go to our render settings. I could include effects or not. We could give it a custom name and just hit render. And that will now just come right over there and turn that. Could mute that particular file. And then we have the option of just coming over here, and we could also choose, if we do like an entire track, we could disable the track. So now we just have the audio file, and so do render in place, or you could just come over here if you wanted to do the entire track. You could just say, okay, I just want to take this whole track. You could go to render in place or freeze, and you could now freeze multiple tracks as well. So, and that will basically just turn it into an audio file. Okay, so a question from Fred Robinson says, Greg, which version of macOS are you using now? I'm still in Catalina and haven't had time to update, so I could be supported by Steinberg when I update from version 11 Pro. So I'm running, I think, Big Sur. Yeah, so Big Sur 11.6. That's what I'm running. So, but we have lots of people that are running on Catalina. It just hasn't really been tested through Catalina. So. All right, so we have a question. Is there any way you could see the peak and average meter both in the track fader, same as the master meter in the right panel? So, so let's come over here.
You looked my way and your heart shone through. It caught my breath while you caught me too.
So when you look at the lines here, so let's say, this will show us our peak. So you could just indicate here. So I know it's a bit different than what we can see, but if you kind of look at, so you can see the peak indications here, and also, so you can see the peak level. And what some people will do is, solo tracks and run it into like the analyzer. So let's say if we wanted to come here. So if you wanted to, and as you would solo tracks, you could just kind of look at it here and say, okay.
You told your daddy and he called.
So, here you could see just kind of the peaks
for any boy that dumb.
Indicator right there as well. So, but it is a little different than the other meters. All right, so we see from Jam Studios, question, any reasons why Cubase might be taking 5 minutes to start up, stays minutes on VST2 Plugin Manager? Are there known plugins that can cause that? Windows 10 Defender real-time is off. So, sometimes as it's going through, as it's going through plugins, obviously if you have VST2 plugins, if you have the VST3 version, just run that. But it's generally when it's taking a long time, it's going through and it's having to do, like the first time you boot up Cubase, it actually goes through the plugins and determines kind of what the latency is of each plugin. And sometimes that could take a while, but if it's plugins that are kind of old or are kind of misbehaving, it sometimes could take a long time to do, like I had, so, I was speaking with someone who has 3,000 active plugins on their system, and it takes longer to boot up because the program is having to deal with those particular plugins. So if you have like the same plugins in VST2 and VST3, just don't utilize the VST2. And you could go through different paths in the for VST2, because it's probably going to be one set of plugins that's causing this. And so if you go to your VST Plugin Manager and you go to the settings here, here you can see the VST2 plugin path settings. So try to, maybe disable some of these and see if you can find a culprit, but it's probably just going to be some plugins that are just misbehaving a bit. Let's see, I guess Meta Voltus is saying great country style. Yeah, very well. So it was actually my friend Wayne Estes who, he was the first guy to show me a sequencer on a computer in college. So he did that and I kind of mixed it and tweaked it a little bit and played bass and had a friend play a piano part for it. So. But I liked the song, so I asked him if I could use it for tutorials. See Gerald Ely, or just saying he had to upgrade. See some discussion of, when you have a computer update, you have to update your audio interface as well. So sometimes, so it's always a bummer, but okay. So I think I'm caught up with all of the questions. I know we had, I think, only one or two questions emailed in. So let's go ahead and let me jump over to those, see how we're doing on time. So I think we have all right, so we're doing pretty well. Okay, so let me just jump to some of the questions here. And if you have learned something new, make sure you do hit the like button. All right, so we had a question, and this is about kind of the articulations. So the question is how to get the recorded articulations in the corresponding bottom lane without having to write them one by one. So I think this is like when we're doing like orchestral, maybe like for an orchestral instrument, and we're switching articulations. So how to populate those, I think. Come over here. See if I have it in this. No. Okay, so let me just have something here quickly. All right, so let's say with this, we'll have some strings. Let me just check, make sure we have a sound loaded up. Sorry about this. All right. Let me see if I took over my MIDI port on something else. And just okay. All right, so let's say as I'm doing this, I have different articulations here in this particular patch. So I have long notes, short notes, and let's say all right, so the question was like, how do we record so that, we could actually just kind of take this. So let's say if I come here, Okay, so I'm going to just load up a quick articulation. I'm going to create kind of a part. And when we go to our editor here, I'm going to go to my expression map, and I'm just going to choose to import the key switches. Okay, so we have our key switches here for legato, staccato, and tremolo. So I will now, let's say I'm just going to record some of the notes here. So I'll just put this into. So now I have my beautiful melody here. So we look at it in our editor and we can see that we have the notes. So what I'm going to do now is just place Cubase into record again. And then I'm going to just play the different notes that will be the articulations. So as we play, and I just record. So now I'm going to place that into record. So now, as soon as we've recorded, all of the notes that I just did as articulations have now just been added. So create kind of a blank part, then add, open up and import the key switches. And from the key switch, activate, go to your note expression, and then you want, or to the expression map. And if it's a Hallian-based instrument, you could just do your expression map setup. If it's Hallian-based, you could just go to import the key switches, and then you could just come right over here and say, okay, I want these notes here to be staccato. So we'll start off legato, and then you could just even draw these in as well. So legato fast. And now as we play back, and so all you have to do is just record it, the key switch information as MIDI data. All right, so another question, is there a way to bypass all the plugins at once to do A/B comparisons? All right, so if we have kind of a larger mix going on, so let's say I want it to, we'll jump back to this one. Okay, so let's say we're listening to this project here.
Do you recall the day we first met?
So if I go to like the main mixer, so at this point I could, if you hold down, I think it's Alt or Option, I could bypass all the inserts or all the channel strips, all the sends, all the channel strips. So, and you'll, if you don't see these immediately, you go to the info line here, or to like this little setup window, and it's going to be called state buttons. So, and then if you wanted to turn those off, you could just come right over here. So let's go back and activate the state buttons. So while you're doing your project, if you wanted to make sure all the inserts were cool globally, alter option. Then you can bypass different parts of the mixer.
Right after that Garth Brooks show, you told your daddy
so let's go back to our live questions. Thanks for emailing all the questions in. All right, see we're at 129 likes. Thank you very much. So let me just go back to the live chat. Okay, Michael Teams, yeah, once people whack the like button again. So you see any Cubase software on Metaverse mode. So I don't know what Metaverse mode is. So if you could let me know what that is. Sorry for my ignorance. So we see, can Cubase be used on an older laptop? So if you're running it, at least on Windows 10, you could definitely run it on older machines. So I still have like an i7 laptop with 16 gigs of RAM. It was a Music XPC laptop I got from Music XPC, and that laptop still runs great. So 16 gigs RAM, and I put a bigger, SSD in over the years, but it's been just kind of a workhorse. All right, and see Matt Ellison just says he's running Cubase Pro 12 on his Surface Pro 8 for portability, and has 32 gigs of RAM and no issues yet, so it's great. See Jeff Sabelski, just talking about his computer. All right, so we see Tiago from Brazil. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Is it possible to block certain notes being played on a MIDI keyboard whilst using the Scale Assistant? Thanks. So if so let's say if we're in our Scale Assistant, so you could choose to come over here and just create a custom scale. So if you wanted to set up your own musical scale, so when you see the scale type, you could come here and, create, if you wanted to add a particular scale, and then you could have the notes only, in that particular scale setup. So you could create a custom scale. And another way of doing it, if you wanted to, was if you are on the MIDI track itself, to use like the input transformer. So we could say, okay, I just wanted to do it on this track, and I want it to open a panel, and we could say I want to filter out notes. We'll say type is equal to note, and we'll say value 1 is going to be equal. I think we could do this to, or you say note is equal to, so say you don't want any, E flats. You could just kind of come over here and say, okay, and this way we could filter out any pitch that's equal to, D sharp or E flat. So you could set up within the logical editor, or create a custom scale if those notes aren't, if you wanted to block particular notes within a scale, so you could do that. reading through different comments. All right, so seeing different formats for audio interfaces like Thunderbolt 4 and USB 4 and older Firewire interfaces that people are using or have moved on from. All right, so we just see, hi, I'm using Cubase 5 and I need Auto-Tune plugin. So, you should probably use the Very Audio within Cubase or use the Pitch Correct plugin. So, but I guess you could buy Auto-Tune if you go to the Antares website and, consider maybe upgrading Cubase 12. Okay, so we see what we need to mastering No for Simple in Cubase. Thanks, Greg. So, if you wanted to master tracks, there's, many people have different definitions of what mastering is, so some people are always going to be, taking multiple files and making them cohesive as like for an album. Or some people will want to just come over here and just apply like master processing to a file. So if I wanted to apply mastering,
it was 7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on our yellow coach to ferry us home. You looked my way and your heart.
So a lot of people may choose to add like a maximizer, maybe like an imager plugin.
Well, even now I'm so in love with you. Just like
so it's a
time ago. Oh, I remember the day that we went. Seems like a long.
if I wanted the bass to be a little more narrow.
And our first kiss, there was no regret. Right after that Garth Brooks show.
And maybe we get a razor.
Daddy and he called my mom, said you were too damn good for any boy that dumb. His sour words are now dead and done. That was a long, long time ago. Now our two grown daughters are married with.
So, those are typical masterings of multi-band compressors. Check out the razor as a limiter is incredibly good. If you need to do like surgical EQ, you could do frequency, but those are great plugins for doing quick mastering. All right, so we have JVI. It's great to see you back on the live stream. I think it's been a while since we've seen you live. All right, so it says he's been on, but he's having some issues with UR44. He's working with support on it. So. All right, so I think I'm at the end of questions. We'll see if there's more questions that come in. If not, we could wrap up a little early. And remember, again, Friday will be 2 hours and then followed by a 2-hour Zoom meetup. If you want to email me, you could email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, and I'd be happy to send you a Zoom link. We'll provide the Zoom link in the live stream as well. So we'll just see how, and looking forward to seeing everyone on Friday. And next week, I will be, working at the NAMM show. So I'll be doing some artist visits and doing the NAMM show. So we won't have live streams next week, but we'll get back onto our normal schedule The following week, I may cut out a little bit early on a Friday. It's my son's last day of school. So, but we'll see how that goes. But I'm planning on kind of normal live streams the week after next. We'll see if there's more questions that come in. If not, we will wrap up a little bit early. Yeah, I see Michael Pierce will have to miss on Friday, so we'll miss seeing you. And again, I think we'll have Clay Ostwald, so you could Google some of his work. So he's done an amazing job, and you've heard me kind of use his projects in the live streams. All right, so we see 138 likes. Thank you very much. And that allows us to continue to do the live streams. Okay, I know there's usually a bit of a delay from when I talk to when it gets out, so I'll wait just a little bit, see if there's any other last minute questions that come in. Okay, so it seems like we're all kind of wrapped up. So we'll see everyone on Friday. Look forward to seeing everyone on the Zoom. Everyone, please take care and please stay safe and healthy. Goodbye.